I think that's where things start to go very wrong, isn't it? I mean, I wanted to specifically talk to you about two of the risks. One being addiction, and one being bullying. Often when we hear experts or so-called experts talking about addiction, they'll say, really, children aren't addicted, they perhaps exhibit obsessive behaviours. And I wondered if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about internet addiction as you see it and as you've experienced it.
Yeah, we also don't really use the term addiction. We only use it, in just trying to explain this phenomena, which really exists. We call it excessive use or misuse, excessive use, because it's not yet acknowledged as a mental condition in the DSM-4 of the United States. So it's a sort of excessive use, and a lot of researchers do not think it's an addiction because no substance gets in the body. However, internet and cyberspace is very interactive, and there are some substances that are produced in the brain that really could cause some sort of addictive behavior. However, even if we don't use the term addiction, there is the phenomena of children really dysfunctioning in very important domains of life. And we have had some children in our adolescent health unit in the second department of pediatrics in Athens that really, some of them had stopped school, had stopped beloved activities and hobbies, and had stopped communicating with friends or flirting, very essential domains of their life. So that does exist. It's a reality. Either you call it or not addiction or excessive use.
I think one of the things that parents worry about, especially, is my son, and it often seems to be boys, and that'd be interesting.
That's true.
What you see as well. And they worry you. How will I know? How will I know if they're actually starting to become addicted? And is it something we can put an amount of time onto, or does it vary from individual to individual?
Yeah, well, time has to do with it, but it's not the only thing.
Sure.
Because there are some criteria. There are some criteria that give the diagnosis according to the Kaplan and Shadow criteria, which are the more recent ones. This is sort of doctor's work, but there are some criteria that do not only have to do with time, but with the way that the child or adolescent sees internet, right? Like dysfunction in main domains of the life is a very important factor. If there is dysfunction in main domains that he had a very good performance, then there is a problem.
Right. And so are we in a position where we might have, say, warning signs, things that parents maybe should look out for?
Yeah, of course. Parents should keep communicative channels open from a very young age, because when we reach adolescence with all this, rebellion, and which is, a natural thing, we must have very good basis. So parents should have communication channels and give very much emotional support to kids. And on the other hand, there must be a balance, giving emotional support and also putting limits. Children and adolescents do need limits, no matter if they seem like that they don't. Limits show a lot of interest, a lot of, we really give an effort to put in limits. So parents should really try from young ages to be close to their children. So if an adolescent really becomes very much reserved, spends a lot of time on his own room, stops, communicating with friends, or even being very indifferent for his personal hygiene or how he looks, his clothes, or going to school, very big drop in his grades. There is a problem starting there, like putting a lot of energy and a lot of time in the computer. And we must take into consideration the guidelines that American pediatric associations have set, some guidelines for the limit of daily screen time for children and adolescents, which must be around 2 hours daily, which doesn't mean that over 2 hours we are sort of addicted or something. No, not in any way. But they put these limits in order for children and adolescents to have other activities as well. And of course, it can be discussed between the parent and the adolescent, and one day he can spend more than 2 hours or another day less or whatever. Just have this in mind in order to have a sort of guideline in our hands to give parents and teachers as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes part of this problem has been fueled by the fact that I think many parents today are actually frightened to let their children go outside and play because they're frightened that things will happen to them, and yet possibly by encouraging them to stay inside and giving them all this new kit and games consoles and computers, they're actually causing other difficulties as well, which isn't...
It's hard for parents today, we must acknowledge that, because they are overoccupied, they come back at night very tired, maybe they do not have the energy to take care of children. It's very hard to create activities because, in Athens at least, for a child to go sporting, you need to have a car, you need to have time, you need to take him or her there. It's a sort of activity that parents have to be much involved. While in the past, the child could just, be in the neighborhood and have physical activity and have all this stuff that we must really prepare a lot now. So it's kind of hard for parents, but they should be well informed, because parents, at least in Athens and in Greece, are not very well informed. They just think that the kids will be okay just to be parked and in front of a screen. Absolutely. This is not the case.
No.
They need to be together. They need to have communication, no matter what their technology level is. It's not that. The kids will feel very nice to tell them about technology things. So
yes, it's their world, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think some research has suggested that parents' biggest fears about online technology is that their children can become victims of paedophiles and predators and so on. And yet we actually know in reality that they're much more likely to be cyberbullied, for example. And you talked just a minute ago about the signs that a child might be becoming addicted, perhaps. Are there signs for a child who's being cyberbullied? Are they similar, or would you see?
Yeah, they could be similar because the child really seems troubled. He or she might be very depressed while she was very happy and very, a child that was really living happily, and then she or he might be reserved and depressed and spending too much time in her own, and really giving signals that she wants or he wants to confess something and really wants to talk to somebody about it. So communication is a very essential thing in this age. And something else that we didn't talk about, especially for internet addiction, is that in the literature there's a lot about comorbidity, like kids that develop addictive behaviors may have other situations, and this is the tip of the iceberg. And it's a matter of if the hen did the egg or the opposite. So what I wanted to comment on that is, in the literature there's about 60% of the kids that develop addictive behaviors that might have conditions like depression or hyperactivity or a lot of anxiety. So comorbidity is always an issue to be considered in addictive behaviors.
And it goes back, I suppose, to this concept that we've been, I think, familiar with for a little while now, that potentially the children who are vulnerable in real life anyway will actually be the vulnerable ones to some of these internet problems as well.
Oh yes, there are theories as well that children that will devote a lot of time in TV, or like they're couch potatoes, they will devote a lot of time in internet and so on and so on. But we must always keep in mind that the internet is very dynamic. It has a lot of power, and adolescence is by nature very vulnerable to excessive activity, no matter what. we had some excessive activity in our adolescence if we go back. So it's a vulnerable age, and when some medium has such power, because it's very interactive, because it has great opportunities, and because the kid really takes charge and has feedback, it's something that really can drive him, very have very excessive use of it.